Hello everyone, we are today here again with Stanimir Dobrev and we will talk about Russian tactics and why they appear so dumb in a certain way. Of course, we must elaborate here to a certain degree. What we see on the TikTok war is often very pre-selected footage, and for instance, I looked also at manuals, and if you, or basically the translation of manuals, and you see pretty much standard tactics or not something where I say, okay, this does not make sense. But of course, there's always the problem from translating basically what is in the manual and what would be ideal to how it works on the battlefield. Because, I mean, as the saying goes, no plan survives contact with the enemy in general. And tactics are quite often, well, very hard to execute because you have to, several dozen or 100 people have to work together and while doing under enemy fire. So generally, just getting dozens or 100 people doing is working on the same thing is pretty hard enough, even if they're not fired at. So Stanimir, what is your take on this, or what did you find out?
I think it's closer to what you said in terms of execution, but it's more the inability to do that execution. I'll start with what we know from sourcing, from testimonials, and from what we've seen as evidence. So first off, we'll start with Russian commanders on the battalion and regimental level don't have enough equipment. So if we're going to start an attack, what we would need is to have a computer, to have laptops or PDAs or tablets and commanders so that they'll see the map. So you would draw up a plan, you would draw up this unit starts at this point, moves through here. At this point, he connects with the other unit or he will start storming that. And for everything to go well in a modern battlefield, this has to be seamless and it has to happen in a coordinated manner, and you have to have differences in the matter of seconds, not even minutes. Well, we know that Russian commanders and LNR and DNR commanders don't really have that equipment with them. They barely have enough computers to even print orders and distribute printed orders. So that creates the first flaw. The second issue is that what they have is how they're picking up storming units. What the mobilized troops have said, the mobilized regiments, which are usually deployed to a sector and then they're left there sitting because they're just like leg infantry, they don't have any organic transport usually. They have told us that sometimes they're being picked up by people for assaults. So they're picked up by people who have vehicles, who have equipment, and they're sent into the assault, and they have a notice on when the assault is going to start and what's going to happen just 10 minutes before it starts. And that's another data point that this will fail as a coordination effort because you're picking up mobilized guys who expected there would be territorials and be sitting within Russia defending some static line without any motorized vehicles, without any additional training and use of combined arms for the most part. They're being used as the storm infantry, which is supposed to be the best infantry you have. The dismounts are the ones who decide whether your tank unit will, or mechanized unit will live or die. And the last point is that we have a lot of videos of Russian attacks where you see tight columns, everyone is doing follow the leader on a single road, and when they start getting hit, you can block off that column and then destroy the rest of them because they're in close proximity just with artillery when you ambush them. So from all of that, we can infer that what is probably breaking is the coordination. First, they're not getting orders relayed to everyone. We know that we can assume that if they don't have enough equipment to produce paperwork, then the unit will not attack properly. They will not have enough maps. They will not have a clear idea what they're storming and why. The second part, moving into a line, that means they're following the first guy, a bit like medieval and then Renaissance and industrial era cavalry, and even before that.
Yeah, I mean, in a line you walk basically in a patrol, or if you march somewhere, and then once you reach usually closer to the battle, you deploy, And generally you go to in this, I think it's called skirmish line or a row. I always get these names wrong in English, but also in German. So you basically, when you march, I mean, in the large sense, you have to use roads, because a division like a German Panzer Division for the Second World War, 1944, is more than 100 kilometers long if you bring it on a road. And then it's called, in German, it's called Entfaltung, and then it basically you develop or deploy in the broad sense, because then you are less likely to get hit, of course. And as you mentioned before, if you're in a column and you're getting suppressed, and then of course they would call in artillery or mortars or some indirect fire if you have this, because the combination of direct and indirect fire is in basically the one thing that holds them down and the other one basically kills them or flushes them out. Or you could also suppress with artillery as well, and then, for instance, you do a counterattack. This is how basically it works, simplified.
What I think in their case is failing is their deployment at the point of contact. Because if only the leading part of the column knows where they're going, they will continue to form sort of a column, and they'll be close by because they don't have individual maps or individual orders, or it's not properly explained to them where they have to go and at what point they have to start spreading out. So they will continue to operate as a big column-like blob. It's not even exactly a column, but it's very tight formation when they should actually be spread out with a certain distance that you can see in the manuals. Now, I think that's happening again because there is insufficient explanation of the orders and people don't know where exactly they're going. Only the leading elements know where they're going and they're hitting. And then again, when we see instances when this column breaks or this formation breaks, and we see people being left behind from the dismounts, we can link that back to the idea that these are mobilized people that they've just picked up. There's no cohesion between the guys in the vehicles and the guys on top of the vehicles. The guys on, we've also seen people from the column who are on top of them. I've seen a video where a person walks next to the barrel of a tank gun just as it's about to fire, which is, if you had a familiarity with mechanized forces, you wouldn't do that. We also see people being crushed by their retreating mechanized vehicles. Again, if you had a combination where these two units were together, we would not see one part abandoning them so easily. And we had also scenes where after they're being fired upon, their dismounts are lying and kneeling around the vehicles rather than moving away or attacking, which is the two options we have. If you just stay next to the vehicles, those vehicles are ranged and you easily be taken out. So what I think is happening is that they're trying to execute mechanized warfare without sufficient communication and coordination, using troops as they go, and this is causing incredibly high losses for the mobilized troops from the second mobilized wave, from the first mobilized wave. And also, it's causing strains between the two groups, because right now, the mobilized soldiers do not want to go on assaults, because for them that's being driven like taxi to a place where they artillery you, and then the other guys leave you. Because the other guys leave you because they've never met you, they don't care about you. And we've seen examples of attacks where 4 different units are being attached to the main unit when it came to attacks on Vuhledar. When they captured 11 prisoners of war, they came from 4 different brigades. Which is, again, it means that these are composed ad hoc assaults. They're trying to execute combined arms warfare. But the tools they have, the equipment that the senior staff has, their preparation to issue orders which are detailed enough and to explain everything and to have a proper battle plan so everyone has a buy-in and knows why we're going there, what we're going to do, where we stop, what happens if they shoot at us, where do we retreat at. That information is not passed along to everyone. And that's an additional failure. And I don't think these failures can easily be fixed because they're baked into the force they're using. They're taking mobilized men who have limited training as storm units. They're putting in new volunteers or remnants of the old contract force as the corps who drive the vehicles. And then the entire thing is organized by regiments and commanders who have insufficient staff to produce the proper staff work to attack. And without adding more officers to the staff, now that so many officers have died, without training with actual vehicles that are in short supply, the mobilized men, and without joining these units and building cohesion over a long period of time, these things cannot be fixed. But they don't have the ability to fix them, as the imperative from the civilian leadership is, okay, we gave you all these mobilized men, we gave you some time to rebuild units, we gave you what we could pull from the stores, you have enough to attack.
I mean, this sounds not like this sounds like pre-combined arms, basically.
Yes.
Because so basically, what do you do to explain how training in the military works and how these units more or less operate together? Simply put, like your basic smallest unit is usually a squad, and for simplification, we say now 10 men. Okay, so you have 10 men. I was a conscript once, so we had our squad is all about 10 men. So you train there in going in a column and then spreading out into a skirmish line and to do that stuff. Then the next level is the platoon, which consists usually about 3 or 4 squads. It depends on various factors. So now you have the platoon. So you have several squads that then interact with each other. So you add a complete new training level. But a platoon is still around 50 men. This is a very small unit still. And then you have a company which consists of several platoons. Okay, now you have a company. You have a rifleman or infantry company. This is not combined arms at all. These are just men with rifles and machine guns, technically. There might be some, it depends also on the configuration, but there could be some additional weapons. So this is just infantry. Now you do the same with tanks or with infantry fighting vehicles. And you have now you have one trained, like you say, you have one trained tank platoon and an infantry company, because you only, for instance, say you only need a platoon to support. So now both of them are trained alone. They haven't worked together, but you already spent like several layers of training. So this goes up, for instance, I think we only trained up to battalion level. I mean, I was headquarters company, so yeah, never. But I don't know, for instance, how we trained, and then you. And this assumes already you have quite good orders and equipment, but you still need this training. So, and this would, when then combined arms, the basics would start, because you still have tank and infantry. Is basically, this is only direct fire, guys, mostly. I mean, yes, you can indirectly fire with your tank. I know these people, some will point this out, but that's not the main way how you generally use a tank. Indirect fire is mortars. And I think mortars probably start on the battalion level. Maybe there are some on infantry level already, on company level already. Depends again on the equipment and the doctrine. And then it's artillery. So basically, also generally for better understanding, mortars are usually part of the infantry arm, and they are more immediate fire support, whereas artillery is a different arm, and there you need way more coordination, because then you have combined arms. So you have infantry, there's the mortars generally, you have artillery, which have the big guns, and then you have, for instance, tanks. And I think the infantry fighting vehicles nowadays are mostly part of the infantry arm as well. But for instance, I know that for the Germans on the Second World War, and they were rather well trained, at least at that time still, for 1942, in Stalingrad, basically the panzer divisions ran out of infantry, and then they brought in the regular infantry, and the panzer troops complained, yeah, these regular infantry guys assume that a tank is invincible. I mean, technically for an infantryman, it's invincible, because an infantryman takes a shrapnel or a bullet and he's dead, whereas a tank shrugs off most of this stuff, but a tank is rather blind. So they generally said, okay, we have to train together. And this is also the reason why you have this training together, that each side knows the weaknesses and strength of the other arm, and that they can basically, you could say that you can properly dance. This is like, yeah, probably it's the best analogy. It's like you have a tango dancer and a salsa dancer, and they both train alone, and even if they're perfect in that, and then you put them together, and yeah, it's not gonna happen in that sense. And so you have then to train both these dancers together, and then combined arms at a point starts. And it seems that the basic training is already missing, and then if the command and coordination and information is also lacking, and intelligence, because if they are moving too close to the enemy line before they spread out, then apparently they don't seem to know where the enemy is either capable of, because he's moving forward because he has better intelligence, or they just don't know exactly when to do this.
And one thing to add is that you said you're used to a squad to a platoon being 40, 50 people. Russian platoon is 21 men.
Okay.
A company is 76 men. Now
I must add, I use World War II German figures for the most part, and early war. So late war, they will only drop down. So yeah, I know also, now Russian tank platoon, I think, is 3 tanks, and German,
yes,
for instance, Second World War, generally 4 to 5.
Now that is something that was created to have more units, but with the same manpower pool, because everyone was lying about the staffing level of the Russian ground forces. That was a big problem. But yes, you should think of their companies being smaller. So that's why, for example, the Russian VDV units looked like regular infantry, because they had the same size companies, but theirs were at least fully staffed. And also, yes, for the Eastern Order of Battle, usually you have 120 millimeter mortars attached to a battery of them attached to the battalion. So that's normal. That's organic to the battalion.
And are there also units that work properly? Because today on Twitter I saw from a German that serves in Ukraine, and he stated like he stated that they think currently they're fighting Wagner, and he notes that the picture that sometimes is presented that they are now fighting some convicts without teeth is far from it, and that, for instance, I think on Twitter there was mentioned for several weeks now that the head of Wagner complains about lack of ammunition, and this guy noted if there's a lack of ammunition, it's certainly not in his place, because if that is a lack of ammunition, they are constantly attacked by artillery, and the enemy is also well equipped with all kinds of equipment and also infrared stuff, I think. So there seem to be also very well equipped and trained units as well still out there.
Yes, but that again is concentrated on certain areas. I don't think that's the overall general situation. And yes, when it comes to those, they have certain tactics that have adapted to fighting with buildings or fighting with tree lines, which look a lot like what you would see fighting in mountains. So instead of them focusing on longer fights and focusing on their personal weapon being a machine gun or an automatic or an assault rifle, what they're focusing on is using RPO thermobaric handheld flamethrowers. So what they have is a lot of artillery concentrated on a small point, so like 12 guns, supporting an assault of 10, 15, 20 people, supported by tanks, supported by AA with density of AA. And the idea is that you have to get those guys very close to the tree line, and then either they win immediately by firing all of their thermobaric rockets and suppress and then kill the unit that's holding that small part of fortified terrain, or they don't. But when you manage to do that, you bring enough firepower to destroy it. Like how in mountain warfare they were carrying just one machine gun. I'm talking about Italy. One machine gun, and the other guys were carrying grenades, because the ranges were so small that you just lob grenades at the other side and try to dislodge them from their fortified position, which would be somewhere behind a rock. in similar case, they're doing this. And that is an improvement of the tactic because that works. When it's coordinated and it happens and it's done correctly, it can very easily overwhelm a small fortified position. They just a dugout with a few zigzag lines in front of it, hiding in a tree line. And because that's usually the defended terrain. Tree line with a dugout inside it, or a building with fortified machine gun posts. And that way you can suppress the Ukrainian defense. That's a good improvement in terms of it can work and it does things well. But again, not all troops can execute that. And there's not enough artillery to support that heavily a lot of troops. But that way you can inch by inch take one position, and your goal is to take one position, then the next group comes next to you. And it doesn't matter if almost the entire squad is gone. The next group will also be small and will have to take just one dugout. That tactic works. But again, it works when it's employed well and when there's enough resources to employ it.
So yeah, and the higher level would be operational in that sense that you create with this tactic, you create a break-in and then a breakthrough to build out. So basically a break-in is you breach the first line of the enemy defense, and the breakthrough is you break the line behind it and then you move past and basically with your tanks or your mobilized forces behind and attack the enemy command and control infrastructure and his artillery and something along those lines. This is, for instance, what the Germans tried to achieve in the First World War and generally achieved in the Second World War in the very beginning, that in the First World War, these basically sound like stormtrooper tactics. So you focus on a small part in the front line, you break into the trench line, you break, and then the follow-up group breaks the next trench line, and then you are in the enemy rear. And here it seems they only focus on getting the first trench line, hold their position, and then bring for the next line a few days after. So once the defensive consolidated, they do it again. So it's fighting forward inch by inch and with a lot of firepower and also sometimes manpower. Could you shortly explain what an RPO is? Because I basically I only know it from Warno and War Game, and I know it's a rather strong unit in this game, but I have actually no idea how it really works. It's basically a flamethrower with a grenade.
Yeah, it's listed as a flamethrower and it's used by specialist troops, but it's a thermobaric missile that's handheld and you can fire it on the go. One person carries it and fires it.
So it's a rocket flamethrower. It's basically the rocket, the thermobaric rocket, then creates the flame field.
Yes.
But there's no like regular flamethrower.
No.
Okay. So it's basically an area of effect weapon.
Yes.
Okay.
Especially designed for fortification and infantry.
Do you fire it directly or indirectly? So is it
direct
flat trajectory? Okay.
I think it's a flat trajectory. I haven't held one personally, but I think it's a flat trajectory from what I've seen.
Okay.
And yes, as you said, we don't see the second stage with that breakthrough and then behind that because they're not moving at such a speed. We're seeing the map move with hundreds of meters, maybe a kilometer once or twice when there's more open terrain, but they're usually moving in increments of hundreds of meters or even tens of meters in some places. So it's not that fast. They're not actually achieving a breakthrough.
Yeah, it seems they don't aim for it in the way it's described.
Well, also we have to look at the mud and how everything is going right now, because in some places the terrain just won't let you move in that far. Even tanks will get stuck. Nothing to say about lighter vehicles.
So is it because due to the Rasputitsa or to the mud and everything?
I think in some cases, yes, because if you have a lot of vehicles going through a field, you just have huge piles of mud that are uneven. You have the two wheels or two tracks that go, and then in the middle you have a big section which starts getting in the way of everything. So I think that's why you can't have more mobile operations, because just the terrain doesn't permit it, and you're focusing again on roads. Now you can resupply and do things with that, but I don't think it's that great either.
Is there anything more to add from your side?
Well, one of the things to add, which you mentioned about the convicts, I don't think we'll see a lot more convicts. Maybe we'll see as much convicts, but because right now Russia is offering people who have small sentences, like a few years, they're just arrested, they're just given their sentence, they can get commuted and just go to war. That's a new thing that happened from this month. And also because the penal colony population isn't that large to support further mass mobilization without just mandatory mobilization from the military. And again, in the amount of men who are serving long sentences for dangerous crimes, and this is not their first offense, it's closer to 45% of the population of the colony, and that is in the colonies, and I think that's almost completely tapped out. You also compare it for age, and I'll give you the numbers if you want. I've done a review based on the 2021 numbers because, again, after people started using the numbers to guess how many people are recruited from the prisons, they stopped putting out the numbers. But there's also another thing that I think it's unlikely that the Federal Corrections Institution it's a federal service that handles prisons, would let all of their prisoners go because that means letting go of their budget. And they fought for that budget.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Okay, then thank you very much. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.